Our next speaker today really does not need much of an introduction in the Chicago tech community. Mike Gamson has over 20 years of experience in recruitment, sales, product marketing, leadership, and we're so excited to have him here today. He spent about 12 years at LinkedIn building the global customer success and sales organization and has recently transitioned to his current role as CEO of Chicago-based software company Relativity. Please give a warm welcome to Mike Gamson. Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having us.
I'm so stoked to be here. Hey, everybody. Hello. How you doing? Doing okay? I feel both connected and removed. Both. Or that we're at a silent disco and we're about to you're ready for that, yes? Less ready? More
That's
ready.
Next.
Great. Is it wrong for me to scoot closer?
Yeah, I think we need to be a little bit closer. There we go. Okay.
Hi.
Cool. Well, thanks again for coming, Mike. We're really excited
My
to have
pleasure.
you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. This session is extra special and fun for me because prior to joining G2, I spent about 5 years at LinkedIn working with and admiring Mike's leadership skills as he led the global sales organization at the time was across 3 unique lines of business and 30 offices globally. So it's awesome to have you. And
great to be here.
You can see the room's packed. There's some standing in the back. I'd like to coin that the Gamson effect. How do you feel about that?
I feel a little bit embarrassed, humbled, and grateful. Thank you.
The Gamson effect. I love it. Cool. So today we have a room full of sales professionals, quota carriers, business development, co-founders, executives. Those are a lot of different hats that you've worn at one time or another in your 20-year career so far. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in the Chicago area in the North Burbs, and I had a great experience, idyllic suburban kid experience, and I share that and start there because I've come to recognize that that's what it means like when you come from privilege. And so I like to start there because I don't take it for granted anymore, and I used to. I used to take it for granted that I came home and my parents were there, and that my house was not a war zone, and that things were generally good, that I went to a school where I could do what I want and I could kind of unconsciously be whoever I wanted to be. So we'll come back to that stuff, perhaps later, but that's my starting place. And I went to school out east, had a great experience in one of those schools where you could study whatever you want and there was no core curriculum. I took no tests at all in college. It was awesome. I was an art major and a religion major. And then I narrowly avoided life as a banker at Goldman, and I ended up in Costa Rica as an entrepreneur, I suppose, just trying to earn enough money to learn how to surf and hang out there. That went well enough. All my friends moved down to Costa Rica. We had a whole big thing, opened a few other businesses. Came back to Chicago, met my wife working, and then spent 8 years in San Francisco learning tech. Became a product manager and a product marketer. First introduced to sales, and then I came back to Chicago to start a startup in 2006 after a little sabbatical. The startup went well, but a mentor of mine had called me and said, hey, you should ditch that rinky-dink startup. Like a month or two before, he was telling me it was an amazing startup, so I knew something had changed. And what changed was that he had just taken over as CEO of this company called LinkedIn, which I had not yet heard of. And after a bunch of months of cajoling me to join, when I refused to move, it took a while longer, but my wife was pregnant, we wanted to stay here. So I joined as LinkedIn's first faraway person, as an individual contributor, did a bunch of roles there, but ended up for the last 10 or so of those almost 12 years as the head of the commercial side of LinkedIn. And then took another sabbatical this year, traveled with my family, and the same folks that we traveled with in 2006 and my Costa Rica adventure, but now with wives and kids and bigger amount of posse to move around with, which has pros and cons. And then just landed back in Chicago a couple months ago and started another chapter focused here.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So the first question that we want to get to is specific to yourself as a sales professional.
Okay.
It's no secret or surprise that the buyer's journey has completely changed today, and probably doing the sales job throughout your career 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5, even 3 years ago, parts of it probably look really different. How do you think the buyer's journey has changed, and what do you think that means for sales professionals today?
So I'm happy to share my thoughts there, and I don't know if I have truly new ideas in this category, or maybe just interpretations of other people's ideas that I've heard and studied from. But I think fundamentally, if I had to start with one, it's the amount of information that the buyer has prior to you arriving there. I mean, when I was taught to sell, and I was taught in a traditional Miller-Hyman sense I'm 45, for those of you like my age or older, it was with a literal physical blue sheet. like not the kind that then got ported over into kind of an awkward application blue sheet, but like physical blue sheet where we put like red stars on stuff, and like we worked an enterprise account in that way. And the assumption was that when you showed up, you were supposed to extract a lot of information from your buyer. And as a sales leader over the last bunch of years, we expected our sellers to do all that homework up front so that they could respect the buyer's time and know what they need to know about the buyer's business, so that instead of saying like, tell me what you do, I find that's an insulting question today. Actually, today I received an email. I got 2 emails today from sellers. This is like a note for sellers out there. If you happen to be pitching me, so first of all, I will respond to 100% of outreach. Okay, so this is not the normal, you're a CEO and you get a lot of inbound, what do? I respond to 100% of outreach, and because I can't help myself, I have a lot of unsolicited coaching. So if you reach out to me, please be ready for me to engage. So I got 2 outreaches today. One was actually late last night, but I looked at it this morning. And one was, I don't know if this person's here, the person is here who sent me something about like the suite at a local Chicago sports team. Find me afterwards, because he wrote a great email. Like a great cold email. If you gotta reach out cold, this is what you do, people. And he did it perfectly. So first of all, he like went online and he learned everything he could about me. Not in like a scary, stalky way, but in like I've put stuff out there, I've written stuff, I've done some videos. He's like, he watched them and read them. He referenced them. Point number 1. Point number 2, he referenced 2 people that I really know and like, that he's had real conversations with. And he's like, I talked to these people, they said blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm with you. And then he put the thing that he was there to sell, which is like this fancy sweet thing that I'm probably not a buyer for, but he wants to sell to me. He put it in the context of my role. He said, I know you've just been in role for 2 months, and this might not be something on your front burner. However, and then he went and he delivered a value prop about why I might want to think about it. And when I responded to him, and again, a random guy, if you're here, and I know his name, but I just want to say it out loud. What I told him was, listen, I'm not even into sports, and I generally think this is like not a great use of company money. However, your email was so good that I will walk this to the person, the head of sales, who might be interested in this, because like I respect your outreach and like you just earned something there. Counterpose that to this form letter thing I got today, where the person ended with, which of the following days make the most sense for you for us to meet? And I was like, it was so assumptive and it was blanket, it was off. So what's changed, Britt? Sorry for that tangent, everybody. The expectations of the buyer have changed. I think the expectations of the seller have changed. And this idea about showing some compassion, in my opinion, and some respect for the engagement in both ways. We're all sold to, many of us, and we all buy stuff, both directions. Let's recognize that it doesn't have to be one against another, and let's just try to respect each other in a discourse between competent professionals.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. And maybe that person is in the audience today.
His name's Tom, by the way. I don't know. I remember Tom if you're here. Yeah.
Tom, you got to find Mike after. Great email. So you touched on a little bit of this, I think, in your previous answer. But if you had to boil it down to the most essential skill, one skill for a salesperson today, what do you think that would be?
It's kind of tricky because I think sales is hard. You have to be good at a bunch of things. Brittany, I don't know if this is a skill or a trait, but I just said the word a moment ago, and so maybe we'll riff on that for a sec. I feel like being compassionate is actually where it's at as a seller. Compassion is putting yourself in someone else's shoes and trying to see the world through their eyes, and ideally alleviate suffering if there is some. Salespeople, we've been trained to think about identifying pain, recommending a solution, but I think sometimes we skip that moment, and it doesn't have to be like a huge thing. It can literally be a moment of just putting yourself in a compassionate mindset. For example, if I'm working with a group of outbound calling or outbound reaching folks, I guess if I say calling, I don't know if that like dates me, by the way. I'm like, when I was a salesperson, we used the telephone. But if you were in an outbound motion, the phone is still at least sometimes involved. And what I like to do myself, and I still do this today, Steve Luzik kind of taught me the beginning of this practice, is I recognize that I might have a call sheet that I'm trying to get down that has 10 or 20 or 100 names on it. The person, the human being, not just a name, it's a human being that I'm about to interrupt, it's very unlikely that she is sitting there waiting for me to call. So I like to spend just a moment with myself picturing that person, and again, erroneously because I don't know her or him or whatever, but the exercise I find valuable, I'm about to interrupt someone's day. What are they doing right now? Are they having a good day or a bad day? Did they just get out of a conversation with their boss that made them feeling great? Or maybe they're feeling lousy today? Did they just start work? Are they behind? Are they ahead? What moment am I calling into? And although I don't know, and it could be the whole range of human emotional spectrum, it could be anything, I find that just taking that second to attempt to be compassionate, put myself in the shoes of the person I'm about to interrupt, slows down my pace. It helps me remember that when they pick up the phone, they're not ready for me to do my whole thing. Hi, this is Mike Gamson. The reason for the call is I'm blah, 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 blah. They're just like doing their thing. And so I'd say compassion.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so simple, but it's something that I think in the speed of everyday routine, we can oftentimes look at a list of leads, a to-do list even, a list of numbers. It's people. We're selling to people.
Yeah.
And I love reminding us of that. Cool. So we're going to transition a little bit to talk about hyper-growth growing pains. We have a lot of those types of companies here in the room today, incredible innovative startups, hyper-growth companies, even some enterprise companies as well. You've been at multiple companies through many of those stages. How do you think the best way to navigate through the need for speed and the need for process and structure in a hyper-growth company?
Yeah, it's a great question. And if there is like a packaged answer here, I don't know it. But
Not a trick question.
What I would say is, and part of that I mean is it's probably different every time. You know, I've had a couple of experiences, LinkedIn being probably the most pronounced in terms of the company I joined had just over 100 people. I was an individual contributor when I started. When I left, we had 14,000 people, and almost 6,000 of those were on my team. That's hypergrowth. Like, it was a lot of people, short period of time. And there was a lot of years in a row where doubling felt like a relief because it was only doubling this year. We're only doubling this year. And so I'll use that as the kind of the backdrop to shared set of experiences that if we're in luck, we'll end up in a minute or two with an answer that is like in the box that you provided for me. So I think first it's about recognizing you're in that moment, and that being in that moment requires a set of actions and decisions that are probably different as a playbook from actions and decisions that accompany other growth moments where you're growing well, 30% growth, 50% growth, 60, 70% growth. That's great growth. That is different from hypergrowth. So what happens in those places and how are they different? In a sales and marketing place, in a revenue generation spot, anyone who's ever had to do the planning process will, I think, resonate with this. And those of you who have not yet, but aspire to own that plan, maybe as a head of function in sales, this is like perhaps like the most valuable thing I can do for you. You walk away with this nugget and you'll be slightly less likely to be fired in that moment, which is you build a plan, right? And let's say your plan is to go from X to Y, 5 million to 10 million, 10 million to 30, whatever it is, bless you. That plan, I can guarantee you, has one variable in it that is more sensitive to the number being realized than any other variable. And that is the date by which the number of salespeople who are at full speed quota are in role producing. So if you're supposed to go from 10 million to 20, and to do so you require adding 30 more sellers, and your model suggests that they all start on Jan 1, but actually they show up between January and March and they get to full speed quota between April 30 and July 2nd, there's nothing you can do to catch up on your number. You've already lost. You have already lost by a mile. Nothing else you do really matters. Getting qualified butts in seats on time in the spot that your model suggests it is, that's like the whole thing. So managing for hypergrowth before anything else is managing the forecasting process of your talent acquisition organization. So being a sales leader in hypergrowth is being a talent acquisition leader in hypergrowth. And my guess is you probably spend 95% of your time trying to forecast your sales numbers, 5% of your time trying to forecast your talent acquisition numbers. I'd flip it. If you've got the right kind of qualified butts in seats at full quota speed, the numbers happen on their own. Recruiting does not happen on its own, and it is not the job of your talent acquisition partners. So I think that's like by far like the most useful tactical thing I can probably share with you. I'd say the other things are, don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. Forgive yourself all the little mistakes you're gonna make because speed is where it's at. When I first hit the front edge wave of that kind of growth at LinkedIn, and I had to make my first serious senior sales hire. We were going from selling, LinkedIn at the time didn't have an enterprise product. It had that individual subscriptions product that you take out your credit card, you swipe it, and now you have better search and in-mail communication. The first enterprise product at LinkedIn was companies who had lots of employees buying that individual subscription wanted a single invoice. I've got 26 people across my recruiting team buying a subscription. Mike, it'd be great if you could sell me something where I could just like pay for it once. That was our first enterprise product, single invoice. So when you were out there selling the value prop of a single invoice, there was something to it. We were getting ready to now release our first proper SaaS product. I had to go out and hire a director level, which was like a big deal for me at the time, my first director level enterprise seller. And I went out and I found from a great, well-known, big brand name enterprise software company, just this quota killer kind of person, which I thought I wanted at the time. And I brought him on, and true to form, as he promised, he's a quota killer, but he trampled over anything else that I cared about, the how we do what we do. He was all about like getting it done. How he got it done left a fair amount to be desired. And as a new person where I hadn't yet kind of earned my right to confidence in the company, and it was the biggest hire I'd ever made, and I was the far away person with whom there wasn't a ton of trust yet, I was faced with this difficult decision because I went fast on the hire. And so this next piece of advice is when you make a hiring mistake, just own it fast and move on. So he lasted for 11 weeks. We moved him out. It was like the best thing that I did in moving forward on that. But just own your mistakes quickly. You have no time. In hypergrowth, you have no time. No time to be a perfectionist. No time to mourn over things that didn't go right. Your next decision, your next decision, your next action. And so just keep running forward.
That's great. And I think the talent points that you made today, it's actually been a theme so far, especially in the morning session. We had the COO of the New York Times who echoed that. So certainly an impactful strategy.
It's all about talent.
Absolutely.
I mean, unless you are in a company where you have a factory or you own a diamond mine or you have some sort of physical product that is the origin point for your value, you're just managing a bunch of human beings who have things in their mind and their heart that can produce value for customers. If you don't look at those, and again, this is kind of trite at this point because like everybody knows talent's super important, not everybody lives it. So just make sure there's no gap between what you know to be the right answer, that human beings are where it's at. And in terms of sales leadership, really you're in the people management business, which really means you're like mostly a therapist and a talent acquisition leader. And just lean into that. And if you don't like it, find something else to do because that's the job.
Yep. Heard loud and clear. I like it. Yeah. So when you think about your career so far, what is something that you are most proud of?
I'll share with you my actual answer, and it's both a little bit dorky and maybe not what you're looking for. But I realized I did something about 6 weeks ago that I felt like legitimately proud of myself about, which I'll explain in a sec. And I realized in that moment that I don't think I've actually felt proud of myself as maybe as an adult, or certainly not in the last 10 years. I've been like happy with outcomes. I've been like psyched to be part of something. But I mean that like actual feeling where you kind of are like glowing inside and you can't help but smile about it, like proud of yourself style. I'll tell you what happened. So I joined this fantastic Chicago company called Relativity. It's we just hit 1,000 employees this week, had a big thing. So it's kind of like a medium-sized software company founded by an extraordinary guy named Andrew Seja, and it's in the legal tech space. It's a B2B company, heart and soul, and a deep workflow product, really complicated product. I'm a person who, being vulnerable here, people, I learn software slowly. Bunch of things I do in my life with reasonable ease. Learning a new piece of software is not one. I have this super close friend who I grew up with. He's like the guy I always go to for tech stuff. He learns software, explains it to me. And this new business, now I'm the CEO of this company that makes this incredible piece of software, I was intimidated about using it. And so this piece of software, Relativity offers certifications for out in the world. There's about 600,000 people that use the software every year. Of those 600,000, there's 9 levels of certification. 3,000 people around the world have gotten like the gold standard certification. It's called the RCA, okay, a Relativity Certified Administrator. And so I had the idea because I'm kind of scared about this and definitely intimidated, I'm gonna like secretly study to get my RCA. I'm gonna pass this test and I'm gonna come out like gangbusters CEO who's like got his act together. So a few weeks before I started studying for this thing. I told a couple people about it, big mistake, because now I'm committed. And I realized what I was getting into, and I had like a mini panic attack, which is like not super in character for me. Like I don't have like a ton of panic attacks. And I was like, holy smokes, I may have bitten off something that I actually can't do. I don't think I can do this. And so I worked my ass off for like 3 weeks, got up super early. I've got 3 kids and like mornings are hectic in our house. And I got up like while it was dark. By the way, in summertime, that means like early, not like winter style Chicago while it's dark. And I was like extra hours, and I went and take the practice test. And I also had all this hubris about I'm good at tests, like I got this. And I came in and I got like a 57%. You need an 80 to pass. So I go home to my wife and I was like, Elise, I'm like legitimately screwed. I now start this job the next day. I had hoped to be like test done before I started because I knew I was gonna be hectic when I started. Start the job the next day, I forget about this test for a week, and then I'm like, I gotta finish this thing. So for the next 3 weeks, the first 3 weeks of my new job where I'm like, not good at being a CEO yet, I'm super inefficient, I'm trying to do everything I can to do well, but I'm like up all freaking night studying. Finally passed this test by the skin of my teeth, but pass fail, so like it doesn't matter that I got an 81 on an 80 pass rate, I've passed, and I became an RCA. So that is by far, as dorky as it is, the thing that I am most proud about in my life as an adult, and by far the hardest thing I've done as an adult.
That's awesome. We'll give you a round of applause for passing the test.
Thank you.
Pass, fail,
It
we
means
gotta
something.
pass.
I know what it means now to like feel proud of myself. I do.
That's great. And now I'm gonna actually take you on the other side of the spectrum.
Okay.
But when also reflecting back on your career, what do you think is something that you may have done differently and perhaps something that the audience here can learn from?
Totally. Oh yeah. And I like the setup. I like the setup there. So some of this I'm sure you know, as we've talked about some of this before, but so it is as a good set.
I'm not reading your mind.
These two people, Brittany has her act together as interviewers.
I'm not reading your mind.
So I would actually start with like the thing probably that about which I feel most ashamed as a professional. And I don't think it's the wrong word to say ashamed. So back to this like hyper growth opportunity that I had at LinkedIn. It is less than once in a lifetime. Statistically way less than once in a lifetime that one gets the opportunity to go from a nothing into a big something, having nearly complete autonomous control in the how. Should you be so fortunate to be in that moment, I'll share the following so that you cannot be that person on stage, starting with this is like my most shameful thing instead. But when you're in that moment of being able to get ready to hire thousands of people, you can shape your team, you can construct a team in any image that you want. And if you bring consciousness to it in that moment, you're pretty likely to be able to output something about which you would feel very proud. When I started at LinkedIn in 2007, I had absolutely no consciousness about the team I was interested in creating. If you had asked me at the time, hey Mike, who are you trying to hire? I would say, I want intellectually curious people who can do anything but choose to sell. I want people who humble me, who challenge me, blah, 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 blah. Bunch of stuff that like sounds totally good on paper. And by the way, I would say many of those same things today. But what happened because of my unconsciousness was that I hired a whole troop of guys that looked and sounded and acted and came from backgrounds just like me and just like mine. Like exactly the same. Same amount of extrovert, similar educational background, same interests, same communication, engagement style. Some of them were like the same height and size. I mean, like, I fully fell into the trap that people like me, and by say people like me, I mean like straight white guys from privilege, have done since the beginning of time. Which if you don't put thought into it, you end up with an extraordinarily non-diverse team. And so I woke up to this fact 5 or 6 years into my journey, 1,000 people now being hired, maybe more at that point, on my team. And there were 19 directors on this 1,000-ish person team. LinkedIn is, I think, appropriately kind of stingy with titles. Right now on the team there's about 6,000 people, and I think there's 16 or 17 VPs, so like quite title stingy, the way we like it there. But of those 19 directors, only one was a woman. Lots of women on the team, none of them in power. No person of color, very, very little diversity on sexual orientation, very little diversity on age, very little diversity on pick which facet of humanity you want to look at. Didn't look like that, looked like this guy. Pretty much everybody. And I had this like horrible lightning bolt moment when a courageous woman on my team, after a big rah-rah sales event that we did, internal event, asked me about why was it that all morning there was only men on stage. And I said like these two horrible things that I've shared with you in the past. The first one was that I literally didn't even realize that. I didn't know. I was just simply blind to it, which is bad in of itself. And the second thing I said was much worse, which was, those are just the guys that are running all the departments. It was a department head meeting. And she's like, that's the fucking point. So in that moment, I was like, I was really just overcome with shame. That I could have blown it that bad. I'm a brother between two strong sisters. My mom's amazing. The matriarch in our family, this woman, Pearl, we named my daughter after. My first company was founded by a woman, and there was a female CTO. That never happens. I have had nothing but examples in my personal life where women thrive and women lead and women succeed. Let alone people of color, let alone anyone else who doesn't look or sound like me, let alone an introvert. God forbid you're an introvert on my team. You never get a chance to speak. And yet, despite all these examples of lots of ways to build teams, I fell into that same trap, and I built a team of guys that looked just like me. So in that moment, I truly had this lightning bolt thing. The subsequent year made a commitment to do something about it. Heart was in it, strategy sucked, didn't work. By the way, like also things not to do, build a strategy for creating a diverse and inclusive team with a bunch of guys that look just like you. Like, not a great strategy, and not a great strategy. It wasn't until we had a group of really fantastic women from our team, the most senior women that were on our team, who constructed a fantastic strategy that's still the core of the strategy that LinkedIn and now many other companies around the world use, do we begin to turn the crank on real change without cutting any corners. And a big part of that for all the leaders in the room who are at various points along this journey but have committed to doing something about it. I have not yet discovered a fast way to get there, only a right, and I hesitate to say right because it's so with prejudice, right? As if my way was the only way, but I believe the right way to do this is to never lower the bar, to not cut any corners. It just takes a long time. And so we went out at LinkedIn in that moment when we had the right strategy. We said it's going to take us 5 or 6 years to get there. And when I exited LinkedIn, the team of that nearly 6,000 people were 50-50 men and women. There were, I think, a little more than 40% of women in the Director Plus category, and our VP levels were very, very similar. We had begun in the U.S. where our own history of oppression and racism is very specific and unique to us versus a global thing like men and women. We had focused on our Black employees, on our Latino employees. We had begun the conversation about all the people with disabilities that have a harder time working on our team. We had talked about what's never talked about in tech, and looking around this room, I'd say we have not yet there, around all the age discrimination that happens. There's a lot. It's a big journey. You can't be halfway in and be successful in this kind of thing. You kind of got to be all in, but you can't do it fast. And so I would say for all the leaders out there who are interested in not repeating my mistake, just wake up to it. I don't believe you can be a modern leader without being great in this category. Get comfortable with the conversation. Go meet some of your colleagues who don't look like you or come from your background, share the same education background, socioeconomic backgrounds, and just like get in there and have some uncomfortable conversations. I don't know another way to do it without just talking to people and opening up and realizing you're not great at it yet. So it is, Britt, it is, I think, really the most shameful thing I've been a part of. It's definitely my biggest failure thus far as an executive, but like most failures, you can learn a lot from it, and it's kind of what you do from it from there.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And
Yeah.
I have to say that I was at LinkedIn and part of the team when the DIBS initiative, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging, was rolled out globally at the organization. And I have to say it brought so much consciousness and awareness to myself and has changed the way that I view both my personal and professional life. So thank you for owning your mistake, letting us learn from it, and ideally driving the right consciousness at all our jobs and all of our companies. So
Right
yeah, I know that we buffer in a little bit of time, so we do have time for one last quick question. This one's actually really timely and personal for me as I sit here 4 months pregnant with my first child. You've talked about your family. You've referenced them at least 5 times now in your 30-minute conversation. So it's very obvious, the type of role that they play in your life. As you can imagine, work-life balance is on my mind as I enter this new chapter. Can you tell us a little bit about how you view that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think maybe at least with 2 lenses. The first is that I try to reject the concept of work-life balance, because balance connotes the equality between 2 disparate parts. And my personal life is so much more important to me than my work life. I mean, the scale is never going to not be that. So rather than try to balance them, I try to integrate them in a harmonious way. Thank you. I know. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. And so, I bring my kids to work. I bring them into my conversation. They're always on my mind. My wife Elise. And I'm proud of my work. I bring it home. I don't want my work to stay at work, because I always want to work on something where I feel like I'm creating virtuous outcomes in the world. I want my kids I want to talk about it at dinner. I want them to be interested in it. And so together is important. I would also say, again, just back on the bias thing, as a man, especially as a straight white man, the world affords you a lot of benefits for free. That's the privilege part. But part of what we can do, I'm a dad who's interested in being a great dad. I'm a soccer coach. I'm the cook in our family. I want to take our kids to school. I want to have a little hand in my hand on the playground. I want to talk about that too for the parents out there who are the breadwinning side of the couple, and have it be okay to go home at 4 o'clock sometimes because you want to grab your kids from their after school thing. Or I come in late. I come in late sometimes, 10 o'clock sometimes, because I take my kids to school and I live in the suburbs, and that's what it takes. And so I'd like to be part of, again, what happens in the modern workforce. What do modern executives do and talk about? Family is important to me. I know it's important to a lot of other people. Or if you don't have a family, maybe it's your running or your painting or your music or your whatever. We're full human beings. We live in an amazing time where you can be yourself at work. Own it. Talk about it. Leave when you need to. Get your shit done in some other way. We have a mobile phone. There's a lot of ways to work. Don't feel victimized by the type of environment that the generations that preceded us had to be in their little spots at the right hours during the day. Use the whole clock. Use all your devices. And I think there's a lot of ways to find harmony and happiness and just a really joyful career and life.
I love that. And I think this group of future leaders is definitely going to bring that modernization to the way we view work-life integration.
Right on. I love it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And
Thanks,
I dig
everyone.
these. Very cool. Look great. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah,
always
so
great.
good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.